Hey everyone, so today I'm going to do my 1-year review of my Tesla Model 3. Let's go! Alright, so I've had this car for about a year now. This is a 2019 model. I got it in September of 2019, and now it is December 2020. Now, as you can see here, I've done just over 15,000 kilometers on this car. So, 15,000 kilometers in about a year. It is a right-hand drive model. As you can see, the steering wheel is on the right. And yes, I am in Sydney in Australia. So this review is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be, talking about battery degradation, about, handling characteristics and how it drives. Because honestly, I'm probably not qualified to talk about that kind of stuff. This review is just going to be kind of like my thoughts and what it's like to live with an EV in Australia from like a typical, daily driver kind of perspective. So to start, we're going to talk about the issues, so let's hop outside. Okay, so for my issues, they were mostly cosmetic, and they were mostly from the delivery as well. The first one is the front bumper. There was actually a chip right here near the tow hook cover. So I'm not sure what they did, but it must be when they were delivering it, they were trying to access this panel and they chipped it. The next thing is at the back. The next issue, again, with the delivery, there was a bump in the back of the bumper. So there was something inside the bumper here that was pushing out. So when they installed it, they pushed the bumper on, and there was a clip or like a connector at the back, which was wedged between the bumper. So there was like a little bump there. And then the third thing was the window trim. So this is common on a lot of the cars. The window trim was not quite straight. Now I have fixed this one myself. I have a video that demonstrates how to do that. So if you're interested, click the pop-up banner in the top right corner. Alright, so the two major delivery issues were the front bumper and the rear bumper. There was a chip at the front and there's a dent at the back. Now, I had 2 service appointments before they were fixed. At the first service appointment, they kind of used touch-up paint on the front bumper and telling me that was fixed. That wasn't very good, so I sent it back again. And they actually agreed to send it to a body shop to get both the front and the back bumper fixed. And that was at the second appointment. Now, that took a day. So after 2 appointments, the car was, essentially fixed. Now the window trim issue, they just said it was within spec, so I fixed that myself. Now, apart from the delivery issues, I also had other minor issues through using the car. The first one is, you see here there's a cancelled mobile service appointment here. That was when I was overseas and there was an update for the car, but I wasn't able to apply it in time. So it was kind of waiting to download an update for about 2 weeks. And there was no Wi-Fi in the garage that I parked the car at. And by the time I got back, the car couldn't download the update anymore. It kept saying there was a pending update. It would download, it would try and install it, and then it would just fail and then try and download it again. So after scheduling the mobile service, they managed to push the download again, remotely, and that's why it's cancelled. And then the car was able to download it and it was fine. The other issues I've been having is with rattles with the car. So there's only 3 main places that had rattles. The first one I noticed was in this speaker on the passenger side of the car. Now, as you drove, this kind of speaker would rattle a little bit. Now, I was thinking about sending it to the service center, but I decided to fix it myself. So removing this speaker is actually very easy. Basically, you just grab it with the door open and then you just apply some upward force and then the whole thing just pops out. After it pops out, basically I just wedged foam everywhere I thought that was loose, and that managed to fix that rattle there. The next rattle is in the driver's side door. Now, there was a rattle inside this whole door panel. And again, this is quite easy to remove. There is 3 Torx screws. Now, I'm not going to go into details on how to do it, but you can remove it and then this whole panel just pops out. And then I did a similar thing. So I just put foam wherever I saw it was loose, and then that also fixed the rattle inside my driver's side door. Alright, so the next rattle was actually in this rear parcel shelf area here. So initially I thought it was coming from the seatbelt, but it actually wasn't. So underneath this rear parcel shelf is like a layer of foam, which is held on by double-sided tape. So it was kind of getting loose, and when that tape is getting loose, it's kind of, the adhesive is just sticking, and then when it's vibrating, the adhesive is coming loose. So to demonstrate this, if I stick my finger down here, and then I push the foam. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but it's like a loud, kind of like almost like a clicking noise. Now that was happening when I was driving, and basically all I did was I just stuck some double-sided tape underneath there and made sure the foam was no longer, just sticking, and that was enough to solve that rattle. So that's about the extent of the issues I've had with the car. There's not that many issues besides the delivery ones, which I hope Tesla has improved now over time. Now, next, let's talk about the transition from a petrol car to an EV. So this is my first EV, and I think a lot of people watching this might be, thinking about moving to EVs and what it means for you as a person living in Australia or someone who's been driving petrol cars, for their whole life. What does it mean to move to an EV, and how does it affect your, day to day? The first thing I want to say is you kind of have to rewire your brain a little bit. So for petrol cars, it's very common to, do your daily commute and then go to the petrol station, once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks to top up your car. And basically you drive it to, nearly empty, and then you top it up. Now with an electric car, it's kind of the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but it's a bit different. So you never drive it to zero. You always, top it up to 80% or, between 50 and 80% basically every day. So your car is almost always full. So for an electric car, you never fill it to 100%, and you also never drive it to 0%. Now, there are chances when you might need to do that, but for the majority of the time, you don't do that. That's not something you want to do. So the next thing you need to learn is how to measure efficiency. Now, for a petrol car, you're used to seeing, how many liters per 100 kilometer. In an electric car, it's called watt hours per kilometer. Now, for a Model 3, 159 watt hours per kilometer is actually quite low. This is not a realistic number at the moment because I've just been sitting in the car. 186 is kind of the average that you would get. Now, 190 is, a bit higher. If you're going hard acceleration, you could see this go up to about 200 watt hours per kilometer. Now, the higher the number is, the less efficient you are. So the more energy you use per kilometer. So that's a different thing, from your petrol car. The next thing you need to relearn is that driving on the highway or the motorway is actually less efficient in an EV than driving in the city. So if you're in stop-start traffic, your EV will actually use less energy, and this number will actually go down. Now, in a stop-start traffic kind of situation, when your EV is stopped, you are basically using no energy. Besides the aircon and, this kind of infotainment stuff, but, close to zero energy. When you're on the motorway, the motors have to keep spinning, so therefore you use more energy. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to a petrol car, where a petrol car is kind of more efficient on the highway and less efficient on the, kind of city roads. But that's because the engine has to keep running, in stop-start traffic, hence you use more petrol for doing nothing. But in an electric car, if you're not moving, you're not using any energy. The next thing you relearn is kind of how to drive a car. Now, in a petrol car, you have a key, you put it in the ignition, you turn it, or there's a start-stop option, there's a button you press. In a Tesla, you don't need any of that. You just have your phone in your pocket, you open the door, you sit down, you put your foot on the brake, you put it into, drive, and that's it. You're good to go. There's no handbrake, there's nothing. You can just go ahead and move. Now, to park it, you press P, and then you hop out of the car, and then the car will just lock itself, and you're good to go. Now, you actually get spoiled by this system fairly quickly. I've gotten to the point where I've gotten into a petrol car, I've driven it, I've gone to my destination, and then I've hopped out, I've left the key in the ignition, and I didn't lock the car, and I walked away. And then I turned around after 100 meters and then realized that I've been spoiled by this whole, EV Tesla kind of ecosystem and how it works. After a while, you kind of take it for granted. You park the car and you walk away and it gets locked, and of course it should do that. Why should I have to take a key with me and then lock it? Why does the car not know that I've left it and turn off by itself. All cars should do this, and you very quickly become spoiled by this kind of system. The next thing you relearn is when and how to use the brake. Now, in a Tesla and most electric vehicles, there is regenerative braking. So I have it on standard. I know some new Teslas don't have this setting anymore, but I have it on standard, which is what I think everyone should have it on. With this on standard, you can almost make it through an entire journey without hitting the brake at all. That's how good it is. Now, it might feel jarring at first that, you step on the accelerator, you go, you let off the accelerator, and it feels like you are braking. That's how hard it is. And basically, you have to relearn how the accelerator pedal works. You can think of it as the brake. If you let go of this accelerator, you are essentially braking. So the foot brake is only there for hard or sudden brakes. For the majority of your driving, all you need is this accelerator here. You push it down and you let go if you want to slow down, and that's it. And you can make it through your entire journey without touching this brake pedal at all. Especially if you have stopping mode set to hold. With stopping mode set to hold, when you reach a stop, the car will apply the brakes for you and just keep you there stationary. And then when you hit the accelerator, it will automatically release the brake and then you can go. I leave that on and make it through my entire journey basically without touching that left pedal there at all. Okay, the next thing you need to not relearn, but to actually learn is charging. Now, if you're using it day to day, going to work, then it's no different from charging your phone. You plug it in at night, and then in the morning, it'll be fully charged. The only time you have to think about charging is if you live in an apartment, or if you're going on a longer kind of road trip. Now, I have taken this car on shorter, 1 to 2 hour road trips, and you can make it, no problems there and back on one charge. That's not a problem. The longest trip I've taken this on is to Melbourne, which is 1,000 kilometers away from Sydney. Now, for that trip, I definitely had to plan, and the software in the car does a very good job of planning it for you, actually. Basically, it tells you where to stop, and it limits the charging time that you need for your journey as well. So for my trip to Melbourne, 1,000 kilometers, I stopped 3 times. One stop was about 30 to 35 minutes. Actually, that wasn't even enough time to eat, because that's how quick it was at a supercharger. And the other 2 stops were 15 minutes. So that was almost not enough time to go to the toilet. So you actually don't have to stop for very long. And the reason for that is the car only makes you charge enough for you to reach your destination. And that might kind of sound scary. So you might reach your destination with, 20%, 15% left on your battery. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you reach your destination with 50% battery life or with 60% battery left, then you have essentially wasted time for filling up your battery, which you don't need since you've reached your destination. Now, of course, if you need to drive around when you're at your destination, then sure, you might need to charge a little bit longer. But if your point is to reach your destination at the quickest time possible, then yes, the software does a very good job of planning the shortest time you need to charge. So having owned this car for a year, as you drive this car and park it at shopping centers, go to charging stations, people approach you and they ask you questions. Now, the most common questions are, how far does it go on a charge? How do you charge? Where do you charge? My typical answers for that, for how long you can drive, I generally just say 400 kilometers. Now, Tesla quotes, 500 plus kilometers, for this, performance Model 3 here, the 2019 model. Now, I kind of never quote that number, mainly because I know I don't drive from 100% to 0%, and I don't want to give people false numbers. So 400 seems to be like a good middle of the ground kind of number, because typically you charge to 80 and then you might drive it down to 20 and then you'll kind of look for a charger. So quoting the full 560 kilometers or whatever it is they quote seems like an unrealistic kind of day-to-day number that you would achieve. So typically I would say 400 kilometers is how much I would drive this car before I would charge it. The strangest question I received was, does the car get heavier when it's fully charged? When I first heard that, I was, oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. And actually, the answer is it doesn't get heavier. Now, the reason is because the electrons move from one end to the other end of the battery. When you charge the car, basically you move the spent electrons from one side and then out into the grid, and then you pump back the same amount of electrons into the other end of the battery. So no, the car stays the same weight regardless if it's fully charged or not. Maintenance and cost. Well, maintenance, people online say, that all you have to do is change the windshield washer fluid. I haven't even done that, to be honest. The washer fluid is the same as from the factory. I haven't changed that at all. I don't use my washer fluid very often. It's kind of sunny in Sydney. Don't have to use the washer fluid that often. And I've actually spent nothing on maintenance. There's been no service fees. I haven't had to change oil or anything like that. The only maintenance I plan on doing is rotating my tires. Now, I plan on doing that myself. I haven't done it yet. I need to move the rear tires to the front, and then that's it. So, yeah, maintenance costs, 0. Other costs? Well, charging costs, perhaps? The cost of charging is a harder question to answer, mainly because there's a lot of free charging. So I can't give you a number on how much it's cost me to charge this car because I've utilized a lot of the free charges at shopping centers, for example. If you go shopping, there's destination charges at a lot of major shopping centers here in Sydney, and you just park there, you plug it in, and after an hour or two, your car is basically fully charged. Now, if I was to charge this car at home from 0 to 100, so this car has a 75 kilowatt battery, it's a 2019 model, it would cost me $21 to do so. So if you're after a dollar figure, 21 Australian dollars is how much it would cost me to fully charge this car from 0 at my home. Now, supercharging, on the other hand, that is not free. In fact, I actually pay for supercharging on my trip to Melbourne, and that trip, so one way from Sydney to Melbourne, cost me 45 Australian dollars, which is quite a lot cheaper than petrol. If you were to drive a petrol car all the way to Melbourne, you would be paying a lot more than $45 to make it all the way there, 1,000 kilometers. Now, if you use a referral code to buy your Tesla, which unfortunately I failed to do, or if someone uses your referral code, you actually get 1,500 kilometers worth of free supercharging. Now, I've only recently had one referral code user, so right now I have about 1,500 kilometers worth of free supercharging. So thank you, Michael, for using my referral code. You are my one and only referral user so far. But other than that, using a supercharger is kind of costly. I think it's about 30 cents or maybe 40 cents per kilowatt, but it's not that bad, and it's still significantly cheaper than petrol. All right, so let's talk about the good and the bad things about the Tesla Model 3. And let's start with the good. And the first thing that comes to mind is the software updates. In fact, I have one right now that's waiting to be installed. So the software updates are great because every couple of weeks, it kind of makes it feel like you have a new car. The more significant updates they've done so far is Autopilot. So we now have the full self-driving preview. We have Navigate Autopilot, which we didn't have at the start. But apart from those, we also have new entertainment options that didn't exist before. So we didn't have Netflix or YouTube in the car, and now we do. In Australia, they also gave us digital radio, which the hardware was there, but the software wasn't enabled. So a lot of stuff comes down through the updates, and every couple of weeks, it does make it feel like you've got a brand new car. And this is why a lot of people say the software updates are so good in Tesla. And they're not lying. I have to agree with them. The software updates do keep the car fresh. And with the whole, self-driving beta happening in the States, I can't wait to see that in a right-hand drive market such as Australia. Okay, so the next good thing about the Tesla Model 3, and I guess EVs in general, is the instant torque. So I'm not talking about the 0 to 100 times or anything like that. I'm talking about the ability to have the acceleration you need when you need it. So as soon as you press the accelerator, the power is there. Your car is going to start moving as soon as you touch it. And that's actually very useful. And I'd argue that's almost like a safety feature. If there's a gap that you need to get into or you need to get out of the way, you just tap the accelerator and you're gone. There's no lag. In petrol cars, you might have to downshift. You might have to wait for the engine to rev up. None of that happens here. It does it quietly and efficiently, and it's just really addictive. You don't even have to floor the accelerator to get that kind of instant acceleration. You kind of just tap it and it's already there. Now in the Performance Model 3, if you do floor it, the acceleration is almost painful, and if you do it too much, your passengers will actually complain and tell you to stop. So there are actually a lot of good things about the Model 3. There's probably too much to list in one video. Just quickly, the Sentry mode is amazing. So now it has a Sentry viewer as well. So if you park your car outside, it will basically keep a watch on your vehicle, and if anyone approaches it, it will save a clip. It also has Dashcam features, which I'm sure most of you already know about. But for me, I think if I was to choose one last good thing about the car, it's probably Autopilot. It's actually quite useful, but only on long drives and on highways. Now, there's the full self-drive, beta happening in America. That seems, cool, but it doesn't look like it's ready yet. I'm very curious to try it, obviously. But Autopilot is still, I would consider it still a good thing. It does actually make the drive easier and less stressful, especially on long distance. Now, I mentioned I went to Melbourne. That drive, I would say I did probably 80% of that on Autopilot, just on the highway, and it's actually very good. Now, it has improved through the updates. Initially, it would abort lane changes, which was kind of scary. It would go halfway across the lane and then decide to come back. After a couple of updates now, that's kind of stopped happening, so I can definitely see it improving, and I hope to get that full self-driving one day. Now, onto the bad things. What is bad about this car? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is actually the wipers. So the wipers are not particularly good. Not in the way that they clean, like they're okay, but in the way that they activate. So on the Model 3, you have to tap this stalk on the side here to activate one wipe, or you leave it on auto. So the settings are down here actually. You leave it on auto, and then when the camera, which is up here, when it detects raindrops, or if it's been covered, it will actually activate the wipers. Now the problem I'm having with the wipers is it's too quick. So if it's like a light drizzle, the wipers will be going crazy. Like everyone else's wiper is on like an intermittent wipe, and then this car is just going ham on the wipers. I wish there was some sort of sensitivity setting, or at least some way for us to maybe train the deep rain AI so that it's a bit better. So that's my one complaint of the wipers. The next bad thing about the Model 3 is the thick A-pillars. Now that's the one on the passenger side, and this is the one on the driver's side. Now the problem I have with the thick A-pillars is especially relevant at roundabouts. So if I'm approaching a roundabout, on the right there could be a car that's also approaching the same roundabout, but as I'm moving forward, they're actually blocked by this A-pillar. And it's only at the last moment do I see that there's actually a car approaching on the right. And you got to be careful. So you just got to be aware that this A-pillar is quite thick. And I think a lot of car manufacturers are making thick A-pillars now because it gives them a better rollover rating in safety tests. So you just got to be aware of this and keep an eye out for cars as you approach the roundabout. And finally, the last thing that I don't like about the Model 3. It's the rear visibility. So this is what it looks like looking out of the rear view mirror here. And if you look at the back of the car, you'd think that visibility is pretty good. Look at this giant, glass panel here. But really, only the non-tinted part is the part you want to look out of. You see, anything up above here, it's kind of pointless. You're not going to see any cars up in the sky. The cars are all actually below that parcel shelf. So if you are driving and you look at the rear view mirror, the majority of the time, you can't even see the headlights of the car that is following you. That's how tiny that little slot is at the back of the car there. So I wish it was, a bit bigger so you can see more of the car behind you. But I guess the saving grace is that, there's like a rear view camera that you can pull up whenever you want. But I still, I guess I've been driving cars for a while now. I'm just very used to just looking up here rather than looking down here at the screen. So yeah, that's another bad thing about the Model 3. Alright, so some concluding thoughts. What do I think about this car? Do I like it? Do I hate it? Would I buy it again? I actually love this car. It's actually really good. Now, I came from a Mazda RX-8, so that's, generally regarded as a fairly well-handling car in terms of how it corners and so on. Now, I have thrown this car through some tighter corners, and you can definitely feel the weight. There is a bit of understeer when you throw it into a hard corner. But then again, you know, as a daily driver, you're not going to do that. You're driving in a straight line most of the times, and this car is great. I love how silent it is. I love how there's no vibrations. I love how that you can sit in the car and film a video with the aircon on and not, you know, have pollutants coming out of the back of the vehicle. Would I buy it again? 100% yes. If I was to buy another car now, it would definitely be some sort of EV. I do not think I could go back to a petrol car after this. It's just so quiet and so easy to drive, and the maintenance is close to zero. So I think that's about it for this video. It's a bit of a long video. It's mostly just me rambling on about, you know, what I think about the car and what I think about living with an EV and switching from, you know, a petrol car to a EV. I'll continue making, you know, little how-to videos and tips and tricks for the Model 3 and continue documenting, you know, my life with an EV here in Australia. So I hope this was useful, and thanks for watching.